Hey, thanks for checking out Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Four. I really appreciate you checking this out. Hard to believe, man. We are on episode 11. Again, I really appreciate you taking some time to listen. Hey, drop me a note, drop me an email, drop me a Twitter DM. Let me know what you're thinking of the podcast, what's been helpful, what you like, what you don't like. Would really appreciate any feedback you've got. Want to give that just a little open invitation. Email Chris, C-H-R-I-S, at 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org, on Twitter, at Coach4. Hey, today, episode 11, we're diving in to working with the media. I've got two guys coming on here. I've interviewed Eric Sondheimer of the LA Times and Evan Barnes, who covers the University of Memphis football team for USA Today. A prestigious job covering Division I football day in and day out. Both are distinguished members of the media. Both are very well respected members of the media. And so I'm really, really excited for this episode today. I'm going to ask them a lot of questions about how we as coaches can work better with the media. They're going to share some ideas, some insight on how we can do a better job getting our programs covered, maybe staying away from some of the pitfalls. Look, man, Urban Meyer, by the time this airs in a couple days, I'm doing this intro on August 5th here, Sunday night. By the time this airs on Friday, I'm guessing he's going to lose his job. I might be wrong, but, you had a reporter ask him 9 or 10 questions and really led to an awful week for him. And that whole story at Ohio State could have been avoided with, that's a whole episode we could get into here, but it could have been avoided definitely if a man knew how to work with the media a lot better, So I think that you will walk away with some tools, some tips here of the trade of working with the media. So I want to thank these two guys, Eric Sondheimer. You can follow him on Twitter at LATSONDHEIMER, again, at LAT. It stands for LA Times, and then his last name is Sondheimer, SONDHEIMER, big time sports reporter here in Southern California. And then Evan Barnes is at Evan, EVAN_B, as in boy for his last name Barnes. So that's at EVAN_B. Again, he covers the University of Memphis football team day in and day out. Beat reporter there for the USA Today after spending a long time here in Southern California covering high school. So welcome to Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Four. You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Four, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker Podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Four exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach4. That's at COACHFORE. And my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Four. Now, let's get after it. Hands up, forget about the past, 'cause you and I's everything I ever asked for. Top down around the West Coast. Well, hey, thanks for joining me. I know you got about 20 minutes here till the passing league, so we'll get going right away on these questions.
Okay, sounds good.
So, Eric, can you tell us a little bit about how long you've been a reporter and kind of how you got into this line of work?
Yes, I've been pretty much covering sports since I joined my junior high paper back in the 1970s. I got cut from the junior high basketball team and wanted to stay involved and decided, maybe covering the game would be a great way to stay involved. And I ended up having some great authority, power that I got to write about the game. So it was much better than sitting on the bench. And ever since I've been writing about sports, I graduated high school in 1976 and immediately started stringing games for the Daily News. I went to Cal State Northridge, and worked part-time for them. And I graduated in 1980 and immediately joined the paper as a prep writer and soon became the prep editor.
Outstanding. So you've been in this for a long time.
Yes, John Elway was playing quarterback for Granada Hills High School when I was covering high school sports there in 1977 and 78.
Wow.
And 79.
Wow. Do you have a favorite John Elway story?
Oh, just that it was quite of a scene back then. Obviously, there was no internet, no social media. If there was, the whole country would know about him. But eventually they did find out because his dad was the football coach, came on at Cal State Northridge at the same time, and I was also the sports editor at Cal State Northridge. And the son just had that most unbelievable arm. He also played basketball, played baseball, ended up pitching for Granada Hills at Dodger Stadium, and but his arm strength was just amazing, and nobody has really come close since. I know everybody in those days used to compare themselves to Elway, but I always laugh because there was really no comparison.
Wow. You've been here in SoCal covered just some tremendous athletes. Who are a favorite of your couple athletes that you've covered that you just really, really enjoyed?
Well, Brett Saberhagen was one. He went to Cleveland High School, threw a no-hitter in the state championship game in 1982. No one has accomplished that feat, and I actually got to know him so well they invited me to his wedding.
Wow.
And he ended up being MVP, Cy Young Award winner, and helped Kansas City Royals win the championship. He stayed involved in his community, came back to become the baseball coach at Calabasas briefly. Always a good guy, always remembered all the people who were around him. So he was a favorite. Jeff Suppan was a good guy out of Crespi. Had a long career. Now his daughter's a pitcher in softball. So I'll be covering her probably soon down the road. And Jack McDowell at Notre Dame High School. Oh my goodness. He was like the most intriguing player that ever covered. He was the most competitive player. He would used to yell at the umpires. He ended up quitting basketball because he got mad so much.
Wow.
And he ended up being a Cy Young winner with the White Sox. Could have been a quarterback, but I just think he wanted to win so badly. So those are some of the early versions. And obviously, I had a good time covering Chino Hills when it went 35-0, just seeing the scene, the development of the balls, and just the excitement that they brought. And how they, everybody was torn whether to support them or not, and the way they played basketball and stuff. So times have changed a lot, but it's been a fun ride so far.
Yeah, I remember when you were covering the Ball brothers there at Chino Hills, you'd get out there pretty stinking early for a seat, wouldn't you?
Yes, you had to get there 2 hours beforehand just to make sure you were in when all the circus atmosphere began. They filled the seats. It was pretty remarkable. I find it hard to believe that's going to be repeated, but who knows if Bronny James ends up going to a school in L.A. somewhere, then maybe they'll want to come and see LeBron. But there's been lots of good teams through the years. Dominguez had some great teams when Tyson Chandler was on the team and stuff. And obviously Modern Days had some great teams. So you can never say never. Stanley Johnson was tremendous at Modern Day. That's the good part of being in LA and the Southern California area. There's so many great athletes from a variety of sports, boys and girls. And so you're seeing the future stars in America out here, whether it's Olympics or other things. Michael Norman was one of the greatest athletes. I got to cover it. Vista Marietta, just a remarkable track runner, and I expect him to win a gold medal somewhere at the next Olympic Games.
Yeah, he just had an outstanding weekend a couple weekends ago. What's your favorite sport to cover?
Well, football is the big sport around, and that's good. I used to like basketball a lot, but I've kind of, as a matter of fact, I almost became a coach. I did. In my first year out of high school, I helped coach in my alma mater, Poly in Sun Valley, but I immediately got pains in my stomach before games. There was so much pressure I was feeling helping coach the JV team. that I thought for the health reasons and also the frustration of trying to get kids to do something, I made sure that sports writing was a better profession. And so, but I love basketball, but because of all the transfers and the baloney that goes on, it's kind of hard to really like it as much as I used to. But I still enjoy it when you run into a kid who's really working hard and dedicated, and a team that's a neighborhood team that's trying to surprise everybody. Those are the fun situations that you enjoy.
Yeah, and you can follow Eric Sondheimer on Twitter. It's at LAT for LA Times, LATSONDHEIMER at LAT Sondheimer, if you don't already follow him there. Eric, you talked about transferring. I mean, that's got to be one of the number one differences you've seen in your 42 years of covering high school sports here in Southern California. What's the future of it? I mean, it seems like it's not going to get any more absurd, but what's the future going to be?
Well, it really, transfers have been around forever. I mean, I remember back in the early days when I started, there were transfers. It's just gone on a much larger scale. And I think the CIF has pretty much given up hope on making sure that people are going for really academic and sports reasons. I mean, it's so easy now to switch schools, and they don't seem to care anymore whether it's for athletic reasons or not. So I just see it just continue to evolve, and private schools have to decide if this is the way they want to play the game and bringing people to help their team. Public schools obviously want as many students as they can because you can't have teachers at that school if you don't have the enrollment. So everybody wants students, and the question is, how do you want that to shape your athletic program? Even Loyola High, which has been kind of stayed out of the transfer game, they end up trying to do some more because they've had a drop in enrollment and you want to stay involved in school. Now, they're not going to be going out and being like the Trinity League. You know, Jay Sarah has 13 transfers this year in football. So I don't see that ever happening. But you have to make a decision if you're a private school, how you want your school to evolve. Because when you get new players and new students in, it changes things a lot. But if you want to win, you probably need that to be at the highest level.
How do you decide on reporting transfers? I mean, I'm sure you get all kinds of messages and emails. How do you as a reporter decide that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And because I'm at the LA Times and I'm covering all of Southern California, I am not going to mention every transfer. And I've had different strategies. At one point, I wanted to put in every transfer for a particular school to maybe embarrass them or feel some guilt and all the people moving around, but that didn't seem to work. Then they went the other way, trying to be quiet, and that's probably wrong because people need to hear the news when a really good transfer comes around. So, I would put a transfer in if somebody is really good and it's going to have an impact on a particular team or sport. That's kind of it. I mean, I kind of avoid JVs and freshmen unless it's somebody who's a brother of somebody or somebody that really is highly regarded. For example, St. John Bosco lost its freshman quarterback, and normally I wouldn't say that, but he went to Santa Margarita, and everybody says he's a very good player. So you want to kind of keep my job as a journalist is to keep people informed. So I have to be careful and also proactive in making sure people are aware of things. But you don't want to do too much, I've determined, because it's really unfair to the people who actually stay. As a matter of fact, I've been writing stories about people who stay. Yeah. I've been compiling a list of people who are going to be quarterbacks for 4 years. Now, that list isn't very big at the moment.
Yeah, but, I noticed that.
I think it's time to also give support to people who are trying to do their best, be loyal, and just get some attention for just trying to stick with their community. So I definitely started last year looking for those stories.
That's awesome. What are some of the errors? You know, this podcast is trying to help coaches in the world of dealing with the media, working with the media, promoting their kids and programs. What are some of the ways that you have seen coaches make errors in working alongside you and working with the media?
Well, the biggest error is they don't return phone calls or they don't fill out forms asking for their top players. I mean, every year, I've been doing this for 42 years, right? Well, every year I send out forms to coaches asking them to recommend top players in the sport of football, basketball, and baseball. And every year there's lots of coaches that just, for whatever reason, don't have time or don't want to do it. I mean, they should send out a note if they have a really good player to tell the local person, you know, I think this guy's really good or girl's really good. I just wanted to alert you to this and stuff. And that will be very helpful. And I get lots of emails from parents, and I appreciate that. You know, sometimes they go unnoticed, but they have a story to recommend. I love to get those things. All I can say is thank you, and then I will take a look into it. I always look into everything. So the most important thing, I think, is them to communicate with people, to let them know. I know they're busy. Some coaches are walk-on. Lots of coaches now are walk-on, so they're busy all day long. But it really if they can really take a moment in the day and be organized enough to return a call or to send an email out or a text to somebody alerting them to news, that's what helps. You know, a lot of the schools that get the publicity are because they have coaches that do that, or they have Twitter accounts that alert people to things happening. I mean, I'm only one person covering over 500 schools, so
wow,
it's kind of important. It's kind of important for people to communicate with me. I live in the San Fernando Valley, so I certainly am aware of LA and Orange County and Ventura County, but some of the other schools or the smaller schools, if there's a story, I certainly appreciate that when people send me an email.
So you're the only high school sports reporter with the LA Times right now, full time?
Yes, sir. We have some freelancers that help out with scores and occasionally when the playoffs start. But we used to have a section, a Valley section, an Orange County section, but all those went away when the newspaper business was kind of cutting back. So it's a good balancing act. I enjoy it, but it's also a challenge. But I'm up for the challenge.
What on the flip side, what are some good strategies you've seen, or what are some things that have gotten your attention and you said, boy, I gotta make sure to take notice of this school or this coach for what they're doing in their community to reach out to us?
Well, obviously some of the schools are doing very good jobs on streaming, and that helps the communities and so forth. Harvard Westlake is an amazing school with utilizing its very smart student body and video operation. They have a great school newspaper, and so you can follow that newspaper, people, or watch their online stuff that they do for basketball, water polo, various things. And they are the best of the best when it comes to that. And other schools have followed and doing their own broadcasts and stuff. But as far as coach is concerned, again, it's a matter of communication. Sometimes it's the Twitter feeds, or sometimes there's an assistant coach who can be helpful when the head coach is busy. I would recommend that. You know, the head coach is so busy with other things, but a lot of them have lots of assistant coaches. If they could just assign somebody to maybe help the media people with whether spelling names, putting up a roster, or just getting out a score, that would be very helpful for everybody involved.
Yeah. So you go out to a game on a Friday night. Do you sit up in the press box? Do you like to stand on the field? What do you do?
Yes. Since we've come to this social media situation, I'm definitely in the press box because I have to tweet, I have to shoot video, I have to write running stories depending on what time it is. And since more games are being televised and ending later than ever, and my deadline isn't changing, I have to be in a situation where I'm able to write it. Sometimes the press box is so crowded they won't even let me in the press box, and that's when I say, fine, I'm going to another school. I mean, you have a choice, you know. That's what it is for the press box, not for everybody else, you know. And sometimes, you know, newspaper writers have lost their priority. We're now like third string to the school streaming people, then the TV people, and then there's radio, internet, and then maybe us. And I said, fine, you want to do that? I'm not going to do it. I got lots of choices here. So, so that's one of the challenges here, and nobody seems to care a whole lot about us when you call the CIF up. Sometimes Tom Hitzsimmons is very helpful, and other times says it's a school decision. So that's how it is. So sometimes that's how I have to make decisions. I call up during the week and ask, is the press box, is there going to be a spot for me in the press box? And if they say yes, then that's great. And I'll just be there. All I need is a spot and maybe a power place for power. I'm not asking for free hot dogs. I'm not asking for free parking, just a spot that I can actually do all the multitasking that I need to do.
Earlier, I talked with Evan Barnes, who used to be out here in Southern California covering games. Eric, I was blown away. He told me that there are high schools that will even charge media members to park.
If they ever did that, to me, it would not be a good situation.
Okay, so that hasn't happened to you?
I would be tweeting, they've tried and stuff, and sometimes they do. But they usually have an alternative. For example, Modern Day, for their Nike extravaganza, they charge you, and but they'll say if you want to park free, you can park across the street and stuff. So you have a little bit of a choice there. But yeah, it is kind of ridiculous. Schools charging for parking is kind of a pet peeve of mine. I think it's bad. I don't think especially for like summertime, they're charging for summer parking for a passing league. Some schools actually started to charge for attending a summer passing league, and that's just ridiculous. So, but that's where we're at. Things are changing, so we'll see where it heads.
How can schools do a better job of hosting print media or internet media at their sites?
Well, most people are very good at it. I don't have a whole lot of complaint. It's just a matter of again creating space for people. Whether it's at a basketball game, a little row and there would be helpful. A football game, if the press box is small, then maybe they can open up a row below it and put in some power there. But they have to understand that if they want people to be there, they have to have an opportunity to create a situation that we can do our jobs well. Because everybody in this business now has deadlines and is trying to do many different things at once. It's not just one person covering that team. That person's covering multiple schools. So they need the opportunity to be able to use their skills and creating a space for that to happen. It would be very helpful.
Awesome. Well, hey, I know you're on your way this afternoon here to a passing league. Who are you going to see this afternoon?
Well, I'm out at Loyola. There's a couple schools playing out here, Loyola, Notre Dame, Fairfax. So just decided it'd be a good time to go see them. Loyola dropped down to Division III football, and that should help them a lot this year.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, hey, Eric, I really appreciate your time and insight for coaches to learn a little bit more about working with the media. And thank you for all you do for Southern California high school sports.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Eric. So, Evan, can you tell us a little bit about your current position there? I know I was reading some stuff this morning, looking it up. Looks like you're pretty busy giving the audience of Memphis football a little insight every single day, a couple times a day. But can you tell us a little bit about your position right now and how you spend your days covering a college football team?
Sure. Well, I am the Memphis football beat writer for the Memphis Commercial Appeal, I should say. And typically what my job is to give updates on the football team or news that I can get or find. Sometimes it could be something every day. Sometimes it might not be. It really just depends on what is going on with the team. And now that college football is heating back up, there's more news to discuss. I'm doing some previews now to kind of build up for the start of fall camp next month. So basically my days now, we're just trying to read up, research, know what's going on around not just Memphis, but the American Athletic Conference, also a few other things as well, just to kind of be as prepared as I can, because this is my first year doing this, and I want to go in as prepared as I can be without, seeing the team outside of spring practice.
Now, let's back up for a second. You used to be out here in Southern California. Tell us what you did in Southern California as a reporter. That's when I kind of got just to know you a little bit. I mean, this is the first time we've ever spoken outside of Twitter, but I know we've had some good conversations there, and I've always really appreciated your work, and that's why I wanted to get insight, both from from you and Eric Sondheimer of the LA Times today to kind of give coaches some insight into working with the media. And so tell us a little bit about what you did before covering a Division I college football team.
Sure. I was a high school sports writer for 11 years. I spent the last 3.5 years with the Los Angeles Daily News, covering high school sports in the San Fernando Valley. And basically, that was where I got my career started. I started off covering high school sports. When I got out of college, I got blessed that somebody had put a connection for me at a newspaper, and I started covering high school sports among other things at the paper. And I just started building that. And as I started moving up, I started just focusing more on high school sports, and that's kind of how this happened. And it's funny because I still feel sometimes like I'm in high school sports mode because I'm still keeping track of what's going on back in LA, seeing who the recruits are and seeing coaching changes and guys that I followed in high school who are now doing well in college. So it's kind of one of those things that just stays with you, I guess. But as much as I'm looking forward to this new challenge covering Memphis football, I definitely have a heart for covering high school football, Friday Night Lights, high school basketball, track, baseball, you name it, I covered it. So it was a fun time in Southern California.
What was your favorite sport to cover at the high school level?
My favorite sport, actually, football was one of them. I actually loved covering basketball because that was the sport I played growing up a little bit more. I actually enjoyed baseball really well because it was just fun to kind of sit down, keep score, and in the San Fernando Valley, it's one of the best areas for talent for baseball and softball, really. So I enjoyed watching that. I enjoy watching track and field because that's a sport that you just see some amazing athletes who push themselves to the limit. A lot of amazing marks that I've seen, people that I've seen who've gone on to do well in college. So I'd say football, basketball, baseball, softball, and track are probably my favorite sports.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of it's always hard to narrow down to one. It's interesting to hear you say that about baseball. I know when I spent time as an athletic director, man, I love the spring season because, those basketball nights, as you know, being a reporter, those basketball nights go very late, and then, you're back at it early the next morning. But baseball, man, I loved baseball as an athletic director, just getting out in the sun, getting outdoors, pulling up a lawn chair. I love high school baseball, yeah. So
it's fun. It's fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like you said, boy, there's some great baseball over there in the Valley. This might put you on the spot a little bit, but who are some of your favorite football programs / coaches in SoCal that you got to, man, I love going to these games? Who are a few of those programs?
Well, it's really great that I've been able to cover programs from the South Bay to the San Fernando Valley to the LA City section, and I've been able to see other programs when I've gone on road games. So one of my favorite programs that I loved was I love covering Crenshaw High School because Robert Garrett runs a great program there. He's not the easiest guy some people like to get along with, but he was, fun to watch. He was a character. He was a teacher. He was great. I love Narbonne. What Manning Douglas has done over the last 10 years has been remarkable. I love how they prepare. I love how they carry themselves with an attitude that we are going to beat you, and we are going to make sure that we are as disciplined as we are good. I love watching Notre Dame High School just because Kevin Rooney is one of the best, not just best coaches, but one of the best people I've covered. He's a teacher of the game. He loves his kids. His kids love him. You can tell that he cares about building up a young man through football in a way that's just more than just what they do on the field, but off the field. Those are probably three that stand out to me. There's so many, but it's so hard because I think you just have so many schools in Los Angeles and Southern California that it's hard to narrow down. But I would say those three probably stand out to me the most.
Yeah, you hit a good array there, from private school down to the public school in LA having a tough time financially. So, you've probably seen it all a little bit, in those terms. Evan, tell me, you spent 11 years at the high school level. Now you're working, in big-time college football. Was this a dream of yours to go to the college level? Did it just kind of happen? I mean, I know the newspaper industry here in Southern California is taking a hit. Were you looking to make that kind of a move? How did you go about getting this job covering a Division I team?
Sure. Well, I had wanted to, when I started, I wanted to cover sports. That was my dream when I got out of college. I wanted to cover sports. So I was happy to ride out, jump into high school, and I really, really loved it. I just loved the passion of it. But around maybe 2 to 3 years ago, I started thinking, what was my next step? Because I've always been told, what's the next level you want to go to? What's the next thing you have on your mind? And I started thinking about covering college sports, and I had, looked around, seeing what people do. I talked to some of our UCLA, USC beat writers and friends across the country just to kind of pick their brain on what goes into covering a college team. And when the opportunity came to come to Memphis and try it out, I was really excited because it gave me a chance to really want to cover not just a bigger program, but covering sports on a different level. Like when we cover kids, you're covering kids who are, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. And if we can be honest, not every kid you can always talk to in the same way you talk to an adult. So talking to young men who are 18 to 23 years old, I wanted to just see how I would adjust to that. How would I have to work harder as an interviewer to be a little bit smarter and be better prepared? How would I have to work with a coach that's maybe going to be a little bit harder to work with because they have so many other obligations to deal with? So I wanted the next challenge. And all my life, I've always looked for that next challenge. So for me, it was something that I've wanted to do within the last 2 to 3 years, just to kind of test myself as a reporter, but also see what I could do and learn covering college sports after seeing it on the high school level.
And so how has that progression been for you? I mean, I'm sure there's a whole new level of challenge there, like you mentioned.
It has been. And I think the one thing is you realize just kind of how much you need to know about a program. And that takes time, and that takes getting to know people. It takes really just trying to push yourself and work the people that you're around. Like going through an SID, for one, has been incredibly helpful, because in high school, you may be lucky to call a coach and he may get back to you. He or she may get back to you. You may be lucky to get an athletic director who can get back to you. But here it's definitely a much easier form of communication where, the SIDs are willing to help you out. I'm in a situation in Memphis where the coaches are a little bit more accessible. So I've been able to talk to more coaches. And one thing that I didn't learn in high school for college is you need to know the assistants really well. And that's something I didn't realize a lot in high school until late in my career. But getting to know the assistants, understanding, who does what, who handles what. Recruiting is a lot more intense with college, because people want to know where people are going and everything. So there's a lot of things that I thought I knew that I didn't know until I got here. And that's been part of my adjustment as well.
Yeah, it seems like there's a whole lot to take into account as you're making that move from the high school to college. Man, it sounds a lot like, athletes, the athletes you've covered from high school making that move to the college level. So a large majority of my audience here, is from the high school ranks. And I wanted to have some, reporters on to help coaches. If you just boil it all down, what's the best piece of advice you have for coaches, high school coaches, working with the media? You have a microphone right here to high school, small college coaches. Talk to me. What do we need to do a better job of? What's the best piece of advice you have?
All right. I will say there's two things, and one will be really quickly. One, if you're in high school, please use max preps. Don't be afraid of max preps as letting your stats out. I know some coaches may not listen to me, but as a reporter, max preps helps us figure out, who the top kids are, who are the stat leaders. It's hard to keep up with everybody. I would just say, I know some coaches may be afraid of putting stats out there, but in college, in the NFL, there is so much more information available. it would be a big help just to have that updated, just so that way you can promote your program and help us see, okay, who can we talk to? And that leads into my second main point, which is just communication. I know that a lot of us in the media, we're not trying to get secrets. We're not trying to bug you and bore you with our mundane questions. We really want to know what's going on. So I would say, like, the more available you are or can be, the better it helps. And I understand coaches are also teachers, and that definitely cuts into time as well. But I would say just the more available you can be, it would just help us, because it allows us to work with you to help promote your program. You can promote your program as well. And I think that relationship is a win-win for everyone, including your players and including the parents who, want to make sure that they know what's going on and that they don't feel like things are being too hidden. So I would just say, like, more communication and just, be available when you can. Because I know we're all trying. Everyone's trying. We respect your job. You guys respect us. Just be more available if you can.
Yeah, no, that's good. Let me ask you this. So I've always thought this idea, max preps, like, when I spent 6 years as an athletic director, and I'd see some of my coaches not using max preps. And full disclosure here, I write for max preps. I write 4 articles a month for those guys, but they're not paying me to say this. I just thought it was silly when some of my coaches would not use max preps. They wouldn't put stats up there. I'd contact them about it, maybe, stop at a practice, ask about that, because, we'd get complaints from other schools, get calls from media, get calls from parents, and then I heard this a lot. Well, a lot of coaches scout on max preps, and I don't want to give them something away. I just thought that was ridiculous. Do you hear that in the media a lot?
I do. I've heard coaches in multiple sports say that, not just in football, but other sports, who don't want people to get information out, and they're very cautious about that. And I can understand to a point, because I know you want to make sure you have some secrets, but I've often said, look, if you have confidence in your players and your system, my thing is, they need to still beat us. They can look at all the stats, look at all the numbers, but when it comes to game time, all those numbers can't help you if we're just going to be able to out-coach you, out-scheme you, and even if you're ready for it, you still got to stop at full speed. And that's kind of how I look at it is, max preps can be a great tool to help high school coaches with, promoting the program, putting information out there. Sure, there's a chance you don't want your kids to, like, get caught up in the stats or whatever, but I think the benefits of max preps outweigh those fears, because I think that as for media, it helps us look and see who are the top players when it comes to, postseason recognition. Who are the people that we might be able to look at and ask about, hey, what's the cool story about this kid or whatever. But I just think that the idea that we don't want it on max preps because everyone can scout us, it's like coaches are going to be able to scout with so much more resources now, with videos, with all these highlight video companies that are out there, whatever. I mean, there are ways to scout. So I think embrace max preps and use it for your advantage versus worry about what they're going to do, because you still have to do what you're going to do.
Yeah, I always told those coaches, I said, man, you're worried about some coach beating you with information he has on stats? I mean, I just always thought that was pretty silly. You talked about be more available. I know that, like you said, some coaches are, they're a firefighter. Maybe they're not on campus. They're a construction worker. They're running a plumbing business and serving as a head softball coach. Do you spend time at the high school level just chasing guys down and never get back to you? Like, you'll want to do a story on a kid or the program and they just blow you off totally?
I've had that happen where I've had coaches who I wanted to do a story on somebody. They didn't want to get back to me. And it was just like, okay, we're going to move on and we're going to find another story to do. I had another situation where the CIF had to intervene at one of the sections I worked at, and they kind of, nudged the coach's ear saying, hey, you might want to do this, let them come do a story because it's going to benefit you guys. And they obliged, and they did the story. They allowed us to do the story. But I know that that's kind of a hard thing, is when a coach doesn't return your call and, we're always thinking on deadline or whatever, it's tough because, it really hurts us because we want to tell these really great stories. We want to help you guys out. We want to, look at somebody and say, hey, this could be a really good story that somebody else might like. And it's going to benefit your program because we're not going to just make it about the kids. It's going to be, about whatever the story happens to be. So, yeah, I've had that happen where coaches have just been like, no, or, they don't get back to me for whatever reason. And it's like, okay. And granted, it's on us to try to call right away, but I've had coaches not get back to me in a timely fashion too.
Yeah, no, that's got to be frustrating. What about what are some of the errors that you've seen high school coaches make? I'm sure a big one's just communication-wise, but what are some of the errors that coaches make dealing with the media?
Let's see. I think one thing is probably assuming that we're the enemy, I guess, maybe. I've had pretty good relationships with some coaches. Some coaches I had to work on a little bit more, and that's fine because, we have to get to know each other. I think maybe assuming that every reporter is going to ask some dumb question or assume certain things. And granted, we're trying to do our job, and there are reporters that I think aren't, good at asking good questions. But I think for us, at least, I think assuming that we're trying to interfere with your time or take away from your practice. And honestly, we're not. Like I've had situations where I try to ask coaches like, hey, when's a good time to come by? I don't want to interfere with your practice. And that's on us as reporters is ask you as coaches, when's a good time to come? And whatever works, we will work around your schedule. And I think that should be a fair thing we should do. But I think it's just kind of that's one mistake is just assuming that we're kind of, a bother or a nuisance. But I think that most of the time we really just want to, tell a story and do our job. Like it's a difference between maybe some of the recruiting sites or some of the other people who kind of have other agendas. But I do think that most reporters people who actually want to tell stories and ask good questions, I think we really want to do our job. So one of the errors in a long way of saying that is I think assuming that we're just, nuisances. And I think most of us are really just trying to do our job and get our stories done.
No, that's very true. I've had guys in the past say, man, why do you talk to those guys, man? Why do you talk to them so much? Maybe they'll see some interaction on Twitter or something, and it's like, man, especially these local sports reporters, they're the bread and butter of your sports program. I mean, today's age with transferring and all that, if you don't do a great job promoting your program, somebody else will. So, Evan, I was checking out a story you wrote on the Memphis wide receiver coach. It's a great story. It gives us some background on his story and what he's up to. And how can a coach help you do your job on a feature story like this? A member of the media wants to do a feature story on an athlete or a coach in their program. How can they help you write a feature story?
Sure. Well, one thing is let us know your players better than we do. Your young men, your young ladies, you understand what drives them and makes them good. I would say sometimes, let us know who are the best stories. Let us know who are the kids we should be writing on. I had a coach tell me, I brought up a story to a coach who said, hey, I want to do something on this guy, coach. And he said, yeah, okay, that would be good. I think you should do a story on this guy. Now, granted, sometimes that may just be a coach trying to placate egos and placate parents. And I totally understand that. But I would just say, let us know, what are the best stories? Just who are the kids that have something really that's fascinating, that's bigger than just, he worked his butt off or whatever. You know that better than us. We'll look at somebody's stats and say, we want to do a story about that. But you can sell your program and just kind of say, hey, this will be a really good story because I think, this is something that you guys will be interested in. And I think that a lot of good coaches do that. A lot of coaches will try to tell somebody, who's their best stories, And so with my wide receiver coach, that was a matter of, talking to him, looking over his biography, trying to figure out what makes him work, what makes him successful, why did he come to Memphis? I think that's kind of what makes a good story is just kind of like, what's something that somebody else would not know about your program? What's something that somebody wouldn't know about how you guys build and climb and work hard to maintain your success? And I think reporters, to me, that's something on us as well. We need to ask those questions to dig and find it out. But I think just letting us know, like, hey, this kid over here, I think he's got a really good story.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good info. What is the frustrating? Take us in the mind of a frustrated prep sports writer. What's frustrating about your job?
Well, I can tell you, one part is, if the press box is filled with so many people, like people who are manning the clock, manning the stats, manning the boosters, whatever, the press box gets crowded. I know that's something that Eric Sondheimer always talks about. That's something that I think is kind of the crazy part is sometimes you're writing your story sitting on a field, the game's over, everyone's celebrating, you're on the floor trying to type your story away to get it on deadline, hoping that your Wi-Fi works. That has definitely been frustrating. Sometimes you're the last person in the gym, you're trying to write your story before they close, and sometimes the school has to kick you out and you're writing in your car. Sometimes you hate making people wait to write your story, but you got to get it done because the paper's still got to come out. So there's that. Those are probably the biggest frustrations I can think of at the moment, is just praying for Wi-Fi, praying for the school not to shut down so you have to type in your car. My personal frustration is parking, but I understand that schools got to get their money that way, but that's kind of my small beef, but that's just me being personal.
Do you get charged for parking? You go to cover a high school game, they charge you?
I've been to some schools that do charge for parking.
Even you show a media pass, they'll still charge you?
Some schools do. Some
Holy
schools will
smokes.
do that. And
wow. Who are they? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, here's the thing. I've found ways around it. Like, I will walk to the school, park somewhere else, and walk to the school just because I don't want to do it. And I understand they have to do it because it's a fundraiser, but for me, and I know Eric has brought this up, if you're a public school, you're going to make your money at the gate with food and with programs or whatever. You shouldn't charge for parking. But I found ways around it. And I would say, like, I understand if you have to do it. I'm going to find ways around it, because even if I get reimbursed, I don't want to pay for parking and be like dealing with that. So
yeah, man, that's ridiculous. I didn't realize, I worked at small schools as an AD, and so we never had much media around. But I would always, man, I would tell our guys to treat you folks like gold. Hey, go to the snack bar, whatever they want to eat. And I'd let the media members know that too. Hey, just show your press pass at the snack bar. It's on us, whatever you want. Yeah, that's kind of shocking to me that they would charge a reporter coming to their game. So, coaches, we got to do a better job.
A lot of schools don't. It's like I'm thinking off the top right now. There are a lot that don't, but some schools, they try to pull that off, and I'm just like, oh, okay, you're not getting my money because I'm gonna park. I'll park on the street if I have to.
That's shady, man. Okay, so let's talk practical there. Kind of wrapping up this interview with you, Evan. You going out to because I know that some schools do a great job of this, a lot don't. But what makes the life of a reporter? What makes your life a little easier? Going out to a Friday night football game, Friday night basketball game, a Thursday afternoon softball game. How can we do a better job of hosting you guys? You mentioned Wi-Fi, you mentioned not having a place to sit. Like, what are some of those real practical things coaches can do?
I would say one thing is just I honestly don't need like assigned seating. Like I'm the kind of person who, because when I used to shoot video, I would be on the field and I knew to stay out of coach's way. I don't really need assigned seating. I think that's kind of, if I want to get there early, get a good seat. That's fine. Like for basketball, I just want to go in. I can find a seat early. That's fine. I don't need assigned seating outside of the press box. But I would say like maybe, if you want to just, most schools do good with just like water. It's not really that much. I don't think a lot of reporters really care about like they have to be super catered to, like treat us like, royalty, because really we're not there for that. We want to just do our job. We understand that it's, you guys have a small budget. We understand it's high school. Like, it should be fun. Like, sometimes being in a crowd surrounded by kids or parents and everything else, that's fun to me. I enjoy being around the people. Like, I enjoy being at a game and seeing everybody be passionate. And, if I have to move my stuff out of the way or whatever, it's kind of the charm of it a little bit. Now, for playoffs and bigger games, I would say that you probably should have a little bit more accommodation, only because it's a lot harder. You're going to have a bigger crowd, and we're going to have a lot more at stake with stories and whatever. But I would say, to me, and I think a lot of good schools and coaches do this, is just, whoever the main point person is, let's just communicate. Just communicate with us. We'll communicate with you. We do a really good job of that, and I think a lot of schools understand that. It's just a few of the schools that maybe don't know you or maybe aren't familiar, and you just try to do the best you can. And that's kind of the hard part. But I would just say, it goes back to that word, communicate. Let's talk. Let's understand each other, and let's do right and help make this a great high school experience for everybody.
Man, that's awesome. That's really good insight. Hey, Evan, thanks so much for joining me today and sharing with coaches how we can do a better job of, telling a story of our athletes and our teams. And I really, really appreciate your insight.
Hey, no problem, Chris. And I want to salute you. You do a great job with coaching and mentorship and development. I love, seeing you talk football, and, I enjoy this, and I hope that this works out really well, because you have some great insight and stuff to share.
Yeah, thanks again. That's it. That wraps up episode 11 of the Coach's Locker podcast. Thank you for listening. I really, truly hope you picked up some nuggets from these guys. I know I did. I think there was some great information that these two gentlemen shared with us. So, again, big shout out and thank you to Mr. Sondheimer of the LA Times and Mr. Barnes covering University of Memphis football. Remember, check out Football Coaching Podcast Network. Visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear our entire lineup of top football coaches. We've got some great coaches a part of this network. Folks, next Friday, episode 12, August 17th, you are going to want to definitely check out my next podcast, Lessons from Coaching from High School to the NFL. Back now, he's the head football coach at Ventura College, Steve Mushanigan. I just butchered his name. I know I did. Coach Moose is going to come in, and it's one of my favorite interviews so far. He and I could sit and talk for 8 or 9 hours, but I think we got it all done in about an hour and 15 minutes. Some tremendous, tremendous stories, wisdom, and insight from a long time. It's just two coaches talking. Here's a guy who coached, Chad Johns, Ocho Cinco, TJ Houshmandzadeh over at the Cincinnati Bengals. Some great stories from those days, and just a lot of philosophy talk, how he leads his program now. We talk some recruiting, the junior college level, and again, it's going to be a great episode. So check that out, episode 12 next week coming at you, Coach Moose. Folks, thanks for checking this podcast out. Follow me on Twitter at Coach4, COACHFORE. If you're still listening, awesome. Check out 8laces.org/podcast. For all my contact information, for now, I'm checking out. This has been the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris 4.